Well, last year there were 4 successful military takeovers across Africa, up from 1 in 2020. In May, Malian soldiers had their second coup in the space of 10 months. Now, this came weeks after General Mohamed Idris Deby seized power in Chad by suspending the constitution and dissolving the parliament. This resurgence in coups across the continent has prompted the UN to call for a return to constitutional order. Experts say the surge in the militarization of politics is influenced by a mix of external drivers and internal factors, such as widespread public frustration against corruption, insecurity, and poor governance. To look at this development, we're joined by International Affairs Analyst Paul Ejime. Thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you very much and Happy New Year.
Yes, indeed. Happy New Year. Well, the fundamental question, just like you heard in our intro there, why exactly are coups on the rise in Africa? What are the fundamentals that are going on?
Particularly in Francophone West Africa.
Absolutely.
I just said I should add that.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So what we have is what you call recession of democracy. That leaders, those who use what is it called, democracy to come to power with elections and all that, are now using some of those instruments to want to perpetuate or even gain power. And when they are there, they are also not delivering. What popularly is known in Nigeria as a dividend of democracy.
Yes.
And so that is what is happening. Poor governance and then political and constitutional coups in the case of West Africa. People fiddling with the constitution, they are, and then rigging of elections and also not governing. African leaders must govern. They are not governing. Now they are for themselves, for their pocket and their families. They need to look beyond them. Governance is about service. But here they want to be served. And that is the issue. All the cry. But let's face it that military incursion or military rule is an aberration.
So I was just going to ask the question that despite the bad leadership, the issue of governance, the frauds, constitutional fraud that some of these leaders carry out and the rest, we don't see the people's uprising. It's the military. It's as if there are external forces and internal forces driving the military to say, go take over and the rest, because you got the guns.
No, if you remember, but let's talk about Mali or Guinea. There were street protests that preceded this military takeover. But what you are saying now is how come they are not persistent, they are not resolute in demanding accountability, because that is what is going to happen. The civil society and all those, you find them that they are becoming accomplices. When people, the government, for instance, when they change the constitution, they organize a referendum. It's people who go there to vote, okay? And then they are using these same people so what is there is that the population must now ask questions about those they are putting, they are voting for, making sure their votes count, and also holding those they have elected to account. I have you mentioned external forces. There is no denial that there are external forces, but it is my people say that is the rat at home that invites the one that outside or tells them where they have fish or meat. So Africans are largely to blame for this.
But is it entirely fair to say that there's no uprising, that the people are not rising up against
administration?
I mean, in the case of Sudan, for example, there is a good example of people power, people saying no to militarization of the system.
Yeah, we should have more of that. Okay. Even in Burkina Faso that you mentioned, remember that it was people power that removed Blaise Compaoré, who had been there for, I think, 20-something years.
3 decades.
Okay? Yeah. So the people came out, millions of them, and then you couldn't kill the people. But here, what is also happening is that the people have become, they are afraid. to die. Like Fela will say, they are suffering and smiling. They have now to come out. They can't kill everybody. You look at Myanmar, look at, where the military took over, but the people have insisted they're on the street. They are killing them, but they continue to...
Go ahead, please.
They continue to, remain there until, the military goes to the barracks.
So how do you remove the justification of the coup plotters or would-be coup plotters who say because of corruption, because of poverty and all of that? How do you, tackle that?
It is by what is the cost? The politicians are the ones invited. If they make peaceful change impossible, they are only making a violent change inevitable. That is, if you went to the bush to bring ant-infested wood, you have to live with the lizards. So here, let them govern. If you can condemn or bring sanctions, but unless and until you govern according to the principles, this was to constitutions.
Speaking of sanctions, has the AU, ECOWAS, the regional blocs become toothless bulldogs? What role can they play? Because they come up with these sanctions that are more or less ineffective.
Yeah, the point is that they are losing integrity and then influence because they are people no longer see, the people see them as a paddy group. They are trying to what we call enlightened self-interest. They are now when a colleague, for instance, is changing the constitution and you don't tell them anything, when the military now takes over, then you begin to shout. Where were you? You ask where was ECOWAS when Condé in Guinea was changing the constitution, and so on and so forth. So they make themselves irrelevant to the point that because they have lost that moral high ground. to hold. That is not to justify military rule. And you talked about external forces.
I was just going to quickly ask you this. Yes. What's the role of France in all of this? Particularly, all these coups are happening in Francophone countries.
It is complicated, but that, let me simplify it. Yes. It is about national interest. It has been said by French presidents in the past that when you remove Francophone African countries, France will become a featherweight, whether economically or otherwise. So what is happening here is that they are now pursuing, France is pursuing its own interests by trying to get, make as much as it can from these former colonies. But now it is left for the colonies to become independent, to assert their own independence. They have not done that. And that is the issue. We can't keep blaming foreign powers after 60 years after independence.
Thank you so much, Paul Ejime, Global Affairs Analyst, on speaking on Burkina Faso and the rise of
military
coups in Africa.